What is living a fulfilled life to you? Following people's expectations, or one's dream? Ever's life had been mapped out by her parents right from birth, and she has dutifully followed the plan. She is to be a doctor. Unknown to her, an 8-week summer camp in Taipei will change her life forever. In the opening scene of Love in Taipei, Ever Wang introduces herself, telling us about her parents, who migrated 22 years ago from Taiwan to Ohio, a year before she was born. She grew up in a foreign country, and her parents had planned her entire life even before leaving the hospital after her birth. She has been at the center of their world, even though she doesn't like being the center of anything. This is because she grew up in a foreign land, where she looks different from the rest. Her parents have orchestrated her entire academic life for the sole purpose of her being an MD. Now that she's finally heading to med school, she thinks she will finally get a break from them, but instead, they get her to go to a summer school in Taipei. She's going home. Ever is seated on her own on the bus, heading to Taipei for an 8-week intensive training that teaches history and language, among others. Their counselor for the trip, May Hwa, welcomes them. She gets a video message from her friend Megan, who misses her already, and urges her to practice her dance. Suddenly another girl, Sophie Ha, starts talking to her at the request of counselor May Hwa, because she is by herself and not talking to anyone. She's shocked and uncomfortable at first, as the girl is a kind of a blabbermouth and keeps asking questions, but doesn't give her space to talk. Noticing that Ever isn't talking, she stops, and Ever proceeds to introduce herself and answer all her questions one after the other. On hearing that Ever isn't excited to be at the summer school, Sophie is sure it's not her first time at Hua. She explains that she hasn't been around Asian kids, as she grew up in the West, but stops midway when she spots someone. Ever is shocked to find Rick Wu on the bus to the summer school, as he's someone who is like a celebrity to her. She explains to Sophie that she has all his articles, and knows almost every detail about him. Sophie mistakes it for her having a crush on him, but Ever assures her that she's wrong, as her mother is the one obsessed with him. She loves to compare them together, summarizing that he is more like the bane of her existence. The news that Rick Wu is Sophie's cousin throws her off guard. She doesn't believe it at first, but Sophie's serious expression confirms it, and Ever believes the program is going to be great, since it's attracting the likes of Rick Wu, an academic genius. They arrive at their destination, and as Ever tries to take her box from the booth, it gets stuck, making her fall, but she is saved by the one and only Rick Wu. He also helps her take her box from the booth. Sophie joins them at the side of the bus, introducing Ever as Rick's fan, going as far as telling him how she talks about him with her mom. She does not stop there. She suggests they date, as he is single and Ever's social skill is 0 to none, but both of them are against the idea. At the entrance of Hua, the headmistress welcomes them in Mandarin, and Ever has a hard time as she doesn't understand, but Sophie interprets for her. Ever wonders why their parents forced them to come to the school when they already know how to speak Mandarin, making Sophie and Rick clarify that they came of their free will. Confused, Ever wonders why they choose to take classes during their summer, and Sophie's statement that it's Love Boat only confuses her further. They head inside, and the huge place makes Ever feel lost. The atmosphere of the summer school is not that of a school, and Sophie explains that they're not in a summer school, but in Love Boat. The Love Boat thing is annoying, as she doesn't know the meaning, but Sophie just tells her to follow her, as looking around will help her understand more. She explains that parents actually think it's a cultural program, but that it's just a big party. They come across a group of friends, and Rick is dragged off by his friends. Ever feels relaxed as Rick, as the summer school is not as intense as she expected. At the registration counter, Ever and Sophie sign, and end up choosing to be roommates. As they head to their room, Sophie assures Ever that they won't need the books that they handed to them, and they come across a handsome boy going after some girls. This makes Ever understand why Hua is called Love Boat. They both arrange their belongings, and Ever remembers when her parents abruptly told her that she was headed to summer school in Taipei, because they understood that she needed a break from their pressure. Sophie's words that she'll help her experience Love Boat fully jolts her out of her thoughts. She even asks her about the look of her dress, which is perfect. Curious, Sophie wants to know why she traveled so far, since she didn't want to be in Hua, and Ever explains that she doesn't really hate the idea, but she just wanted to get into a dance company badly. Sophie is happy because she also loves to dance, and invites her to the club, but Ever declines. She is not one to rush. She just wants to take it slow for the first night, but suggests that she can come another night. Sophie promises that there will be a lot of parties. Dance is the only place that Ever has been able to shut off all the pressures of med school from her parents, because all the expectations melt away when she moves. She wanted to get into the dance company in New York before finding the courage to speak to her parents about it, but her plans were shattered, as she now has a slim chance. She has no place to film her dance videos in Hua. Ever heads out and takes a look around while listening to music. She stops on the rooftop, dancing to the tunes playing on her AirPods, and someone's voice stops her in her tracks. She is shocked to see that someone has been standing there, and he promises that he's been there longer than her, and he didn't mean to scare her. He doesn't want her to feel ashamed, because she's a good dancer. He introduces himself as Xavier, and Ever introduces herself too. He comes down from where he's seated, wondering if she's filming a TikTok, or if she just likes to dance on rooftops, and the silence that comes after she says she just likes to dance seems weird. Getting the message, Xavier bids Ever goodnight, dancing on his way out and making her laugh. Back in her room, Ever calls her friend Megan, who's missing her, giving her updates on her stay in Taiwan. She tells her about Rick, and Megan is shocked, as they believe it's Ever's mother's delusional way of setting them up. Megan advises her to let loose for a change, and Ever spills details about Xavier too. She passes it off as nothing when Megan starts to think too much. Megan is happy that she has chosen to still film the audition. Ever has 7 weeks to do so, but she's worried as she needs a studio or somewhere to practice. Megan assures her that she'll find a place, as Taipei is a big city. Remembering something, Ever has to go, and Megan asks her to keep her posted. She smiles at her phone as she contacts her Auntie Shu. The next day, school starts fully with learning Chinese calligraphy and learning traditional dishes. Xavier and Ever get along well. She's curious about the end of the summer festival she learned of, and a girl explains that it's a big day when parents come. Usually, there's music and dancing, but only the dancing catches Ever's attention. Rick does it again, as the teacher praises him for his perfect dumplings, but he sees it as nothing. During their break, Ever is writing. Sophie is curious to know what she's writing, but Ever explains that it's just something she does, making Sophie tell her to add fun to her list. Hearing this, Ever complains about her boring schedule, making Sophie and her friend explain that they mean having fun outside of the school, like clubbing and hanging out with locals. Sophie and her friends wonder what she does for fun, as she's not an outgoing person. So they try to convince her to join them at the club, after she meets up with her Aunt Shu later that day. They stay alert when a teacher walks in, talking about the early morning sneak-in, and reminding them of the lights out by 10 p.m., all in Mandarin. She repeats in English, reprimanding and reminding them that they're there to learn their cultural heritage. The students are not planning to uphold the rule, though, as clubs don't even open till 10. Ever is sad when Auntie Shu sends her a message to ask if 10 is okay for her to come around. Ever introduces Auntie Shu as the craziest, coolest, and most artistic person, who spent her youth traveling around the world so she could find herself. Ever wishes to be like her, but is unfortunately not. She laments as she sends a text that 10 is not going to be okay. When she sees Sophie heading out at 10 p.m., she wonders where she's going at curfew, but Sophie reminds her that no one has fun when they keep to the rules. Quite unlike Ever, she decides to break the rule by telling Sophie to wait for her. After helping her with her dressing, they head out. The security is tight, but Sophie and her friends look for ways to sneak out. Rick gives them a heads up on the cabs that are already waiting for them, because they know that the students will sneak out, so they pass through the emergency exit. As Ever is about to pass the transparent wall, Rick stops her in time. A group of teachers are eating close by, and he just saved her from being caught. He's surprised that she came, as he didn't expect her to. Even Ever is wowed that everything she's doing is even happening. They get into a comfortable conversation while they're hiding, but Xavier interrupts them, wondering what they're doing lurking in the shadows. He shows them that they can't be seen through the walk if they're outside, and they move. Later, they're all stuck hiding behind the bushes from the security, and Xavier offers to distract them. He ignores their jabs, running toward the security guard. Seeing the counselor, Ever also runs to distract them too, clearing a path for the others. But after they all gather, she's missing. On the other side, Ever is almost caught by the counselors, but is saved by Sophie, who uses a cab to get her, and they laugh. Unfortunately, she can't go ahead with them, because she needs to get to Auntie Shu first. Rick, who's also in that cab, is worried she might get lost, but she assures him that she's okay. Ever gets to her aunt's house, and Auntie Shu is excited to see her. They sit down to have some tea and talk about Auntie Shu's gallery, and her ambitions while growing up. Auntie Shu is surprised that she's in Taiwan. Ever reveals she's in Hue to learn the culture, but she shakes her head, as a culture can't be learned in school. Auntie Shu's question reminds Ever of why she's there, and her aunt provides a perfect place for her to dance. Auntie Shu is surprised she's a dancer, and is sure that her parents have no idea about it. Ever tells her of her opportunity in New York. Not wanting to question the girl and make her doubt her abilities, she confirms that the room is okay, before sending her off to have some fun. Ever is fascinated as she takes a look around the place. A snack catches her eyes, and she goes to get one, even though they don't understand each other. Rick comes in, buying two instead, speaking fluent Mandarin. She's shocked he found her, and even more so that he paid. They go around buying different things and trying them out, and as they head to the next stop, Ever asks why he didn't go to the club. He admits that he followed her because he wanted to make sure she was safe. Such a thoughtful young man. Ever appreciates him, as she's having a nice time. Rick continues his quest of getting Ever to eat Chinese food, but is interrupted by his friends, who want to meet up somewhere else. She rain checks it, and he eventually asks her out on a date, to which she agrees. Ever never expected to have a date with Boy Wonder Rick, as she calls him, but she didn't hate it. Seeing something slip through their door, Ever gets up from her bed to pick it up, and it's a drawing of her. She opens the door to see Sophie sprawled on the floor, and she takes her to the room. The events of the night out have taken their toll on her. In the next scene, Sophie is excited because Ever has a secret admirer, but Ever believes it's someone being nice. She tries to find out which of the guys it could be, making Ever laugh while she calls random people. As they walk around, they come across Xavier and his dad, who's quarreling with him and warning him not to misbehave. The headmistress questions Ever for running around the previous night, but Sophie saves her by spinning up a little lie from nowhere. Ever is grateful because she can't think of getting expelled from the school, as her parents probably spent their life savings to get her there. Sophie tells her more about Xavier's family, and Ever, who wonders how she knows all this, senses a crush. Sophie admits to it, even saying she'd commit crimes to have her heart broken by him. Ever tries to tell Sophie to date him, but Sophie strongly refuses. As in Love Boat, things are taken slowly. At that point, Xavier meets them where they're seated and, on Sophie's request, he starts telling Ever the story of why it's called Love Boat. Two students took a rowboat to stay safe from a typhoon in Taipei, and fell in love as they found their way to Hue. Since then, the school's been less about learning, and more about love, and even parents send their children to find partners. Sophie blushes and commends him on nicely telling the story. However, Xavier reveals he made up the story. All the while, Ever and Rick have been sneaking looks at each other. Later, in a restaurant, while Rick is with Ever, he gets overly excited and talks on and on about food. He apologizes and admits that he gets excited. This makes Ever suggest that he open a restaurant. Rick is surprised, as that is his dream, but he can't follow it as he doesn't want his mom to be disappointed. He's shocked that Ever is encouraging him, wondering if her parents are supportive of her career choice, but they're not either. Rick takes Ever to a beach, which is one of his favorite spots for a walk, and she loves it. She reveals how grateful she is to her dad, who gave up being a doctor in Taipei and moved to the USA, where he works at a pharmacy, as he couldn't go through residency. She understands what he meant at the restaurant earlier, as the pressure is too much on them as children. However, Rick just wants them to have fun and forget about their complicated lives this summer. So far, Ever has been having fun spending time shopping with Sophie, playing with Rick, and even getting drawings from her secret admirer. Her time with Andy Shu is also not left out, and she continues her dance practice. After dance practice one day, she helps Andy Shu with a large canvas. Noticing the girl has something to say, she asks her to spit it out, and Ever confesses that her life is confusing, as everything is split into two. She wants to figure herself out and discover her dream, much like her aunt, and unlike her mother. Although her aunt believes that Ever could be her mom's dream. Not everyone dreams of a big career. For some, having a family is all they ever hope for. Aunt Shu reveals she named her art shop Meng Dai, which means butterfly dream, so it can serve as a reminder never to take life seriously. She advises her not to worry about her dreams so much that she'll not appreciate the life she has. She hands Ever the mop to join her in painting and have fun. Following her Andy Shu's advice to just enjoy the moment, Ever continues having fun dancing and going clubbing with friends. Meanwhile, Megan is happy and jealous that Ever gets to have fun and relax while she works. She even lies to her parents about being able to write Chinese and do a lot of things like playing the cello, but goes clubbing right after and gets closer to Rick in the process. The next day, Rick comes to Ever and Sophie's room with a cup of coffee for Ever. During the hike that day, Sophie is stressed out from the previous night and has to rest for a while, so she sends Ever and Xavier, who were waiting for her, to go on. Xavier and Ever catch up, wondering how their relationships with Sophie and Rick are going respectively. When Xavier asks about her dance and the audition, she truthfully tells him about her insecurity of not being good enough, and he encourages her. Ever runs to catch up with Rick, trying to find out what's wrong, as he looks like he's in a good mood. He apologizes for being off, telling her about how his Aunt Claire wants him and Sophie to show up for her party, but he doesn't want to, as his family will be there, and they're still bitter about him breaking up with his ex-girlfriend Jenna. Ever wonders why he broke up with her, and Rick reveals they had nothing in common. After thinking for a while, he asks her to go with him. Ever is skeptical about this at first, but promises to think about it. They continue with their hike, getting to the top first. The view is wonderful, and right at that moment, Rick and Ever kiss. But their kiss is cut short as everyone joins them. The next day, in Auntie Shu's house, Ever is getting ready to shoot her practice video when Auntie Shu hands her a gift. It's a gown she can wear to Rick's party, and Ever is so happy and grateful. As Auntie Shu leaves, she reminds Ever to lock up and shut the window, as the typhoon might be unpredictable. She is finally able to make her audition video, since she is alone. Unfortunately, she loses track of time and has to rush to meet Sophie, forgetting to lock the window. She heads to the party, and people stare at her while she searches for Rick. Rick sees her first, and when they meet, he compliments her looks. Ever loves the party. Rick introduces Ever to his aunt and uncle, but they don't seem to like her. Rick's aunt then drags Jenna into the conversation. They start speaking in Chinese, making Ever feel left out. As they mention Jenna's graduation from Harvard, Rick tries to also uplift Ever, telling them about her med school and her dad working in the USA as a doctor. Annoyed, she clarifies that her dad is now a pharmacist. She even goes ahead to talk about her dance audition. which makes their aunt and uncle leave her, disappointed. On the side, Ever questions his lies, and Rick apologizes, as he needs a buffer and doesn't want to be criticized. At that point, Sophie walks in, complaining about how Xavier was too casual, and annoyed at their behavior. Ever leaves the party, and Xavier, who notices her, follows. Outside, they talk about how they were both taken for fools at the party, because they lied about who they were. Ever is annoyed, and feels stupid. Xavier tries to cheer her up by trying out her dance moves. She shows him the right way, and they end up dancing and laughing on the road. She dances into Xavier's hands, and they get lost in each other's gaze. The rain starts falling on them, and they have to run till they find a safe space. Xavier hands her his jacket, because she's feeling cold, and Ever gets a sneak peek at his tattoo. She pushes his sleeve up to see it well. Xavier reveals it reminds him to follow his path. Using a pen, Xavier draws it on her hand too, and as she studies it, she realizes that the secret admirer's drawings were from him. When she asks him, Xavier doesn't answer, but kisses her, and she responds enthusiastically. Then, realizing what she's done, Ever apologizes and leaves for the school. Entering the school building, she sees people gathering in the dining hall, and the headmistress informs her that there's no power, and that they're gathering there due to the typhoon. Moving around a little, Ever sees Rick, who hugs her, glad that she's safe because he was worried about her. They move aside to talk, and Rick apologizes for how he treated her in front of his family. He confesses that he cares about her, but says that he has to leave due to the typhoon, because his parents want him and Sophie out of Taipei immediately. He wishes the night had gone differently, especially since he's always himself around her, and they hug. The next morning, Ever heads to her room after waking up and seeing the gown. She suddenly remembers her aunt's place. She rushes there, but the place is already in shambles. She calls for Andy Shu, and Andy Shu hugs her upon seeing her. She apologizes, crying, for not closing the window, but Andy Shu is just glad she's okay, and urges her not to worry. She uses her phone to call Ever's mom, who has been worried, handing the phone to Ever. On the phone, she assures her parents that she's okay, and her mom wonders why she didn't tell them about staying with Andy Shu, and how she's dancing. Ever thought Andy Shu told them, but it was the call from her auditioner that busted her. Her parents try to inquire more about it, but Ever isn't in the mood, and just wants to know what it said. Her mom informs her that she has to try again the next year, leaving Ever in tears. The typhoon brought chaos along with it, and as Ever is lying in bed, she checks up on Sophie, who she's missing already. With everything clear, the students partake in cleaning up. Xavier helps Ever sit a flower pot back up, asking how she's doing and talking about the cancelled festival. They apologize to each other about the other night, and Xavier admits that he just likes hanging out with her. She informs him about all the things that have been happening lately, and he sympathizes with her. Ever is especially sad she messed up, and he encourages her that it's never too late to make things right. In the next scene, Ever is determined to clean up her mess. She takes her friends to Andy Shu's place, and they all help in fixing the place up. Afterward, she gets serious about her Chinese studies and continues her dance practices with Xavier as her judge. They prepare for the Love Boat Festival at Andy Shu's place, and Xavier gives one of Andy Shu's paintings a retouch. As Ever finishes preparing for the festival, she starts feeling her life becoming clear, and she realizes that having the courage to leap into the unknown is what leads to a better life. Andy Shu's place is buzzing as the festival is about to start, and Andy Shu is proud of her. She surprises her by showing her parents are in Taipei. Ever is happy to see them, and surprised, and they explain that they came to see for themselves what she's up to. Taking them aside, she honestly confesses to them that she doesn't want to go to med school. This surprises her parents, because she had been applying to all the programs. But she only did that because she thought it was what they wanted. She didn't tell them about the dance audition because she thought they would disapprove. Now, being in Taipei has made her realize that she's still figuring out what she wants for her life. The festival starts, and all Ever cares for is not about the dance audition or med school, but about helping Andy Shu with her paintings. Aunt Shu introduces her and acknowledges her effort in putting everything together. Ever only cares about the fact that the young people from Love Boat will finally get to celebrate the culture they all worked hard to study, and more importantly, her parents getting to see her dance and be alive. Her parents watch her dance performance in admiration. At that point, there are no more rules or expectations to be met. Sophie and Rick make it to the festival, and everyone cheers for the successful dance show they put on. Ever meets Sophie, who's proud of her, and she introduces him to her new boyfriend, Jeremy. She and Jeremy leave when Rick comes, giving them space to talk. He congratulates her and is truly happy for her. They hug, ending things on a good note. Ever goes around taking a look at everyone, and is so happy that she slips over. Xavier catches her, not believing that she dared to dance without him. He stretches out his hand and they dance together. When he asks what is next, she kisses him on his lips, taking him off guard. At that moment, it feels nice not having everything figured out. Because what's the rush for, anyway? Ever is finally relaxed, even though she doesn't know what to expect next. The future is a beautiful mystery, and Xavier admits it leaves room for surprises. He twirls her and they kiss. In the end, Ever realizes that not having life figured out is not bad, and following one's passion is the ultimate life fulfillment.